Welcome to this episode of the Year in Review, where I'm bringing to you 22 videos, one video each for the last 22 days of the year. And sticking with this theme of 22, today what I'm going to do is something indeed very special. I'm going to be bringing to you 22 pearls of wisdom or takeaways from the various episodes of Unleash with FTEM, that is Unleash with From the Expert's Mouth, a talk show on our platform fromtheexpertsmouth.com. These 22 takeaways are divided into broadly four sections. The first section is around conversations that I've had on the theme of learning and education. The second one is around careers. The third one is around personal development. And the fourth one is around business and startups. And then there is a bonus section as well, right at the fag end. So stay tuned right until the end. What I will be doing today is just skimming the surface, talking about 2 points from each episode. The first one being the primary focus of the episode, and the second one being something that was unearthed as a part of the conversation as the conversations flew naturally. So, as we always do, let's start from the beginning. Let's start from the childhood and education and talk about three of the episodes that dealt with very different stages of the education life cycle. First up, we spoke about the need to make STEM learning experiential with Prem Prasad Mirthini. In case you're wondering what STEM is, it's science, technology, engineering, and maths. This is a theme that we've dealt with in great amount of detail, even in this year in review series, where I've spoken at length about the gaps that the educational system leaves behind and the packs that we need to develop in order to circumvent or bridge those gaps. I had the good fortune of interacting with Prem, who spent a lot of time with Nobel laureates understanding how the academic ecosystem works and how to bridge these gaps by making science and technology more experiential. And we are not just talking about coding or programming, but much more fundamental aspects of core sciences. So that is the main takeaway. But the secondary takeaway that I got from this interaction was around the choice of location. There is an increasing trend that we've seen, particularly post the pandemic, that people have been flocking back to their hometowns and leaving the familiarity and comfort and opportunities of the big metropolitan cities. Prem is no exception, and he spoke about his thought process of why he moved from big cities like Bombay and Bangalore to a small town called Sandur in Karnataka. Incidentally, Sandur is near Hampi, a place which I visited and I loved, as I've also spoken about in one of the earlier episodes of my mother of all road trips, where I covered 7,500 kilometers. So if you're interested in picturesque locations, do take a look at that. As we move on from early education to preparing for competitive exams, I had the chance to speak with Rajat Gulati, who's a serial entrepreneur, but his first love is education and maths, and he spoke about how teaching was the most rewarding experience of his life. And that's a lot coming from somebody who's a serial entrepreneur. So do tune into that episode and it will make you think why you're still stuck to doing things the same way that you were doing as a child. A lot of the foundational numeracy skills that we use in our day-to-day lives today are those skills that we learned when we were very young, maybe 3 to 7 years of age, and our brains could only handle that much. Rajat questions why is it that we still continue to use those methods and not look at something which is more attuned to our age and our capabilities right now. The second takeaway, which was incidental to the main discussion, was around the way he went about building his career. Interestingly, he spoke about the fact that at one point in time, the weekends used to be his main source of income or revenue generation, whereas the weekdays were those that he dedicated to his passion. So it's an interesting example of how you can think differently about structuring your work and changing the paradigm of what the weekend and the weekdays mean for you. The third one in the series of learning and education is a conversation that I had with Nataraja Nanjan Daya. He shared his experiences of how, even in his 40s, despite years having elapsed since the last time he did anything on the formal education side, he went about reinventing himself and acquired a couple of professional qualifications that required a lot of academic rigor. If you are thinking academics is no longer for you and it has been years since you've done it, or you did not enjoy the academic experience while you were in school or college, then this episode is a must watch for you. It could possibly open the door to a world of possibilities for you. And that brings me to the incidental or ancillary takeaway from this episode, but a very powerful one at that. Nataraja spoke about his mental model of career transition, and he mentioned one thing that I would remember for a long, long time to come. which is that the career transition from employment to freelancing or being on your own or entrepreneurship is only a matter of time. Even when you're 60 years of age or whatever the retirement age in your organization may be, if you're in employment, you would not retire from work typically because we tend to have a much longer lifespan these days. And we are pretty much mentally and physically active at the age of 60. So it's not a question of whether or not you want to move away from employment to being on your own. It is only a matter of when. And if you have to do this transition at the age of 60, when your energy levels are likely to be on the lower side, you might as well start in your 40s or 30s or 50s, whatever age you may be at. But you need to start thinking about it and you need to start preparing for it. Hopefully, these 3 episodes will give you a lot of perspective on education across the entire spectrum, from childhood to professional education to adult education. And I'm sure this will help you build a solid foundation for your career. So let's talk about careers, which is the second big theme of the conversations that we had during the year. And once again, let me take examples of 3 very different episodes where we spoke about different dimensions of career planning. The first one was with an army veteran, retired Lieutenant Colonel R.S. Shyam, and he spoke about his career journey right from the time he joined the army, how he went about joining it, to the time he went through a meticulous planning and execution process to transition out of the army into a corporate career. Incidentally, as we saw in the earlier episode on the year in search, one of the big questions that people were asking right through this year was, can I change? And within that, one of the big themes was, can I change careers? And this conversation gives you many answers to that, particularly if you are in the army or in the defense. But trust an army guy. The principles that he has enunciated are very relevant even for regular corporate folks out there. Which brings us to the secondary takeaway from this conversation. The second takeaway is around how corporate India has just not understood and realized the potential that this workforce has to offer. The typical perception in corporate India is that retired defense personnel are good for admin and security sort of roles, but this conversation will open your eyes to a world of possibilities and opportunities. So, if this has not been something on your radar and you are struggling with talent, or even otherwise would love to have good talent on board, then do surely watch this episode of Unleash with FTEM. Moving on from the serious world of defense to something light-hearted was a conversation that I had with Manoj Dogra, who's a stand-up comedian himself and also runs Shukai Films, an organization that connects creators and filmmakers to the world of OTTs and platforms. Building a career as a stand-up comic requires development of various skills, and in this conversation we peeled the layers of what it takes to be a stand-up comic. What is the process of comedy? There are fascinating learnings here, not just from the perspective of somebody who wants to become a comedian, but if you want to develop any skills, it's a good example of how you can go beyond the obvious and go about learning the various sub skills that make up the composite skill that the world sees. The secondary takeaway is also related to the field of careers, and we speak about the various transitions that Manoj has made from banking to IT to becoming a stand up comic and now to becoming an entrepreneur, enabling other people in the creative ecosystem. And speaking of enablers, that brings us to the third episode under this broad theme of careers, which is the conversation that I had with Abdul Salam, who's the CEO and founder of Trueman and is on a mission to create millions of jobs for the retail workforce in the country. This is a great example of a purpose-led organization. And even though on the face of it, I should have classified this under the business and startups category, I would much rather place it in the careers category because the value that will be created by providing these opportunities to millions of people and upskilling them will far outweigh the value as just another commercial startup. While this is a great story from the perspective of entrepreneurship, as this is a bootstrapped startup which is profitable and growing, I have still put it under the broad umbrella theme of careers because I believe that the impact that this will create by upskilling and providing opportunities to millions of people and the focus that Truman has on building careers rather than just providing economic opportunities because there is immense value in upskilling the workforce, providing them the opportunities. But most importantly, the focus is to ensure that even temp workers or the gig workforce is able to build careers rather than just look for mercenary opportunities which do not help them build any skills for the future. And that brings me to the incidental takeaway from this conversation, which is around the future of work itself. This platform is a part of the gig economy, and many experts have predicted that the gig workforce is going to form a very large proportion of the workforce in the times to come. And we are already seeing many indications of this. And I have also covered a few of these themes in several of the earlier episodes as part of this year in review series. And the future of work and the future competencies that are required and the current challenges that we face is an interesting segue into the third broad theme that we've covered during these Unleash with FTEM episodes, which is the theme of personal development. I had the opportunity to have a fascinating conversation with Brijesh Avasthi, who's the CEO and founder of NetClan, a hyper-local networking platform. Building and leveraging our networks is a very important capability in today's times. And listening to this conversation will lead you to question your current approach to networking, to social media, to whatever we are doing on the internet, and encourage you to the world of hyper-local and looking around the people in your community. Whether or not you build your local networks through technology or otherwise, it will still prompt you to think differently about people around you and in your vicinity. The central theme of this discussion was around loneliness and how loneliness is one of the biggest pandemics of the current times, but a silent one at that, which we do not realize. But Brijesh gave examples of several other countries where governmental interventions have come about in this field to combat the pandemic of loneliness. One of the other takeaways from this conversation was around the fact that in today's times, most of the people are not just lonely but also extremely distracted and unable to focus. In an earlier episode of Year in Review series, I have also shared my thoughts to help us survive in this extremely distracted world that we live in and how we can ensure that our time is well directed. Brijesh also shared his early experiences of working extensively with the government and rolling out Aadhaar cards across the country. And that brings me to another episode with Vinny Patro, CEO of Recordant, a cash management solutions company who also had the experience of working with the government sector in a big way. And those experiences, incidentally, led him to the path of spirituality. And he spoke about these issues extensively in the episode on MBT, or Mind, Body, and Time. His take on spirituality. Thankfully, you don't have to switch careers and work in the government sector to embark upon your spiritual journey. You can listen to this episode and draw some learnings and inspiration from this itself. Spirituality is again something that means different things to different people. And in one of the episodes where I have done a double reflection, reflecting on the articles that have been published on From the Expert's Mouth, let me explain this double reflection a bit. I have taken the experiences shared by 22 different authors on our platform From the Expert's Mouth, who have backgrounds that are very different and contrasting to my own background. But I have reflected on their own reflections of their stories and seen how my experiences and stories interconnect the experiences that these people have shared. And in that context, one of the things I speak about is spirituality. So if you're interested in 22 diverse things shared by 22 diverse authors and thinking about how your stories may or may not intersect or intertwine with those stories, that's a great episode to watch. And speaking of episodes, one of the big shows that really brought the world of business and startups to the mainstream audience of the country was Shark Tank. And in this next section, around business and startups, I had the opportunity to have a fascinating conversation with the co-founders of one of the successful contestants in Shark Tank, which is Pashmi Shah of Getaway. If you've ever wondered what it takes to start a business from the kitchen of your house and from there to successfully bid on a show like Shark Tank, then this is an episode you must watch. And of course, there is an incidental takeaway as well, which relates to bringing two completely different ways of doing business together. One being the traditional family business, and the second being the exciting world of startups. In this conversation, we examine how these two disparate things come together into a family run startup. From one startup which is working on health and fitness by making ice creams using whey protein to another one which is Nirog Street that is into the space of Ayurveda. In this episode of Unleash with FTM, we caught up with Ram Kumar, who's the CEO and founder of Nirog Street. We spoke about how he's going about building trust in Ayurveda. This is a great example of how we can embark on an audacious journey where we intend to change the perception of the entire world or the country around a discipline or a field. And needless to mention, if one embarks on such a journey, there are bound to be setbacks. So, the incidental takeaway from this conversation is also around how Ram went about dealing with these adversities and challenges. And I'm sure if you listen to some of those challenges, you will find that your own challenges may pale in comparison to what he went through. And this brings me to the last two bonus takeaways in our list of 22 takeaways from Unleash with FTEM. So let me take one takeaway each from the first and the last episode that I spoke about. We ended this conversation with Ram Kumar on a celebratory note where he gave the wonderful message we must find opportunities to celebrate and not even miss on a single opportunity to celebrate. And that's a great message to start the new year with. So, in this new year, as we embark on a new journey and look at plans and all the things that we want to do in the coming year, let us not miss this opportunity to celebrate all that has happened, all that we've achieved, all the experiences that we've got during this year. And experiences is a great segue into the last of the 22 takeaways from the Unleash with FTM episodes. And in fact, it's the central theme of the first episode that I spoke about, which is making STEM learning experiential. The formal academic and education world can benefit a lot from bringing about experiential learning into their curriculum. Similarly, we can enrich ourselves immensely by learning from other people's experiences and also by sharing our own experiences, because there may be unintended consequences of bringing out the experiences that are buried deep within our memories. If we bring them to the fore and share it with people, you never know what may click. Something that may appear obvious to you may provide a great source of learning to somebody else. I have learned a lot from sharing my experiences, and I've also learned a lot from other people who have shared their experiences on our platform. So, as we enter into this new year, there are two or three ways in which you can be associated with this ecosystem of shared experiences through our platform from theexpertsmouth.com. There are two pathways to this experience sharing. The first one is the Get Featured link on our website from theexpertsmouth.com, where anybody in the world can access that link and freely share their experiences, which the editorial team will validate and build upon and help you publish and share your experiences and stories with the rest of the world. And these experiences are read by readers in over 160 countries today. This is all the power of true and authentic content, because it comes from your genuine experiences that you are sharing and cannot be replicated by any content creation agency or any algorithm, even if it is built on most advanced tools such as GPT-3, which have become the rage this year. The second pathway is, of course, through the Unleash with FTM, and the good news is that we are coming up with season 2 of Unleash with FTM after bringing to you many stories from diverse people across the spectrum. I have only covered 22 takeaways from some of the episodes of season 1 of Unleash with FTM. There are many more episodes as well, and you can go and check out the playlist, the link to which is given in the description below. And definitely do subscribe to the channel, both from the expert's mouth as well as my channel here, so that you do not miss out on these wonderful insights and experiences that people are sharing with you. So with that, I will see you in the final episode of this Year in Review series.